We're back. After a long break, we're back at the Nerdynomicon weekly. I promise that for you guys. But today on our show, man, I'm going to be sitting down here talking about comics with 1/6 Synthaholic. That's next on the Nerdynomicon. Welcome to the Nerdynomicon. So, I said that I was going to be sitting here with a Synthaholic.
A sick one.
A sick one at that. Maybe you guys don't know what that means. Maybe you do, seeing as though, we've had 2 Synthaholics on this show in the past. But if you guys are tuning in for the first time, back at Buffalo Comic-Con earlier this year, I met up with David Duncan, who is one of the hosts of an awesome podcast called Synthaholics. It's a Star Trek podcast, but they've been getting into a little bit more just generalized sci-fi. I was actually on their episode last week when we were talking about Dune. But I've got the other co-host sitting here with me, Aaron O'Brien. How you doing, man?
Good, the better half. There you go, Dave. I'm your better half. Yeah, Synthaholics. Yeah, we had you talk about David Lynch's Dune. So if you want to check out that Synthaholics, you'll have Robbie giving the Dune rundown.
Yeah, basically. Such a surreal movie, too.
It's a great movie. It's different. It's bizarre and bad, too.
I think I said on the show, so bad it's good, so good that it's bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It's David Lynch.
Yeah.
It's Lynchian. It's textbook Lynchian.
It is very Lynch, and it's wonderful, though. It's wonderful in that manner that it is Lynch, and he puts a stamp on it that only he can do.
Yeah, there's nobody else that can out David Lynch.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, David Lynching is in the name.
Yeah.
Is that a verb? Can we just use that? I mean,
We're
Lynchian is an adjective already.
It might sound kind of bad if you start saying lynching.
I think I'm going to try it. Let's David Lynch this shit.
Yeah. Oh, David Lynch that shit. That'd be good.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to do this. Let's David Lynch.
You can't say Lynch this shit.
No,
don't say. Just say David Lynch that shit.
Yeah. No. Hashtag civil rights.
Yeah.
All right, so before we get started, talking about our main topics and everything like that, Synthaholics.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that show. I mean, when did you guys start up? I mean, it's obviously a Star Trek podcast.
Yes. Well, it's Star Trek podcast. We started about 2 years ago, and we're moving into our third year. And we basically just run down random episodes, sometimes movies, of Star Trek. We kind of give a quick synopsis of the story. We make some jokes. We're not serious whatsoever. We're not dry. We're very rude. And then we give...
Very rude.
Very rude. And then we kind of try to find parallels in our everyday lives. Because I believe that Star Trek often... why it's so great of a show is that it has underlying stories or ideas that they're trying to convey to you without hitting you over the head. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe you see it and you're like, oh, it's just a weird science fiction story. But if you really think about it, it has deep meanings that they're trying to give you a message or an idea that is a little more than just a sci-fi story. So, and I think most sci-fi actually has a subtext to almost any sci-fi you actually, any decent sci-fi.
I agree with that.
So, I mean, even Star Wars, Joseph Campbell's, Hero's Myth, it's the same idea. So, but yeah, so Star Trek, we kind of drill down into all that information and we have fun, just making fun of the goofiness of Star Trek, but also, the serious stuff that, that makes you think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a terribly huge Star Trek fan, but even I have to say, the campiness of it all mixed with the stories of it, it does make for some compelling television.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you can get past William Shatner and
whatnot, you get the silliness, the sets, some of the early costumes and stuff like that. Yeah, they are terrible. I mean, I'm not, but there's something lovable about it at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's usually some good, stories that are going to be told. And then when you get into Next Gen and you get into Deep Space Nine, Voyager, things start getting a little better. Like the background sceneries are a little more robust. The uniforms look better. The acting gets a little better. I mean, you got Patrick Stewart, for God's sake.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, I mean, you get a lot of nice... It ramps up slowly, so... And everyone has their own entry point. Some people are big Next Gen fans. Some people are Voyager fans. So there's lots of different...
Have you ever met an Enterprise fan? Do they even exist?
I like Enterprise, but I do admit I've never met somebody just say, I came in watching Enterprise and that hooked me.
See, the thing is, I love Scott Bakula.
Yeah.
Quantum Leap. Mm-hmm. How can you not,
man? It's a great show, yeah.
But
Enterprise has some good shows. If you give it half a chance.
I trust you.
I'm not going to say it's the greatest TV you're ever going to watch, but it has some good shows. And the fourth season, just before it got canceled, it was really starting to kick ass. And then
just like everything else that's good, it just starts to kick ass and then they kill it.
Yeah, and there was
going down the list: Firefly, Carnival, Twin Peaks, Selfie, what's his nuts with the cigarette, Constantine,
yeah.
God damn! Every time it starts to get good, they kill it.
Oh yeah, and it's a sad thing, but that's how TV is, and hopefully, with Netflix shows and other kind of streaming services, we'll start seeing more shows that'll run longer because they have their own built-in audiences, and they're not, they can actually have metrics of like, we have this many downloads, this is a popular show, and it's worth keeping around.
Right. I mean, it's easy to calculate that stuff. Netflix is notorious for not releasing their numbers, but it's easy to calculate that stuff. I mean, look at Luke Cage. It broke Netflix the day that it dropped.
Exactly. So there's definitely people out there that are going to go crazy, and they'll latch onto it. They'll see the numbers like, okay, this is a show we want. And they'll take more chances. Do they know what, like Netflix knows? Now, I've heard, Netflix producers basically say, like, just go crazy. No limits. Go as far as you want. Be as raw. Be as explicit as you want. And they go for it. So.
And what does that give us? It gives us Kingpin decapitating a guy with a car door.
Yeah.
It gives us a suburban comedy that happens to have zombies in it.
Yeah.
With Santa Clarita diet.
Yeah.
I mean, the possibilities are endless with these shows.
It's wonderful.
It's phenomenal.
We are getting... This is probably the best time to be alive for TV shows.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, like, there were some great years in the past, but I think we are seeing such a renaissance of TV shows and longer stories with big serial arcs.
Right.
Where it used to be episodic, like, the early Star Trek was like, we're dealing with this subject today, and, like, they won't go back to that subject. Or what happened on that. Maybe they'll reference it here and there, but
right. But for the most part, they can usually stand alone.
Right. And now for the new Star Trek Discovery, they will be a serial, so they'll be they won't be as much episodic. They'll have a long story arc. That's what we've been told so far. So it's going to be cool, see something different.
Absolutely. And again, on a streaming service as well.
Right. Well,
I'm not happy about it. I'm apologizing for I'm not happy about that.
Right.
Especially seeing as though they're putting it behind such a paywall, I mean, if it dropped for a Hulu or a Netflix or an Amazon, I'd be down.
Right.
Well,
and if you don't know, Star Trek Discovery is being released only on CBS All Access.
Not on the actual channel, just the streaming site.
Just the streaming site. You have to pay for it. It's like $10, and you will be getting commercials. You have to pay an extra like $3 or $4 to not get commercials. So, like, for me, I'm not really interested in anything else CBS has to offer.
Right.
I mean, nothing per se that I'm going to be running out to subscribe to it. So this is just a money grab for them, purely. Yeah. And it might crash the show because they might dump a lot of money in.
It's entirely possible. I mean, here's my issue. I have zero problem paying for a streaming service for just one show. Okay? I've done that for 2 years with Ash vs. the Evil Dead for the Stars. Okay? I have Hulu anyway, but I would gladly do it every time they release a new season of Deadbeat. Amazon Prime, I plan on doing Amazon Prime again just to get the tick.
Okay.
I've already done it for Man in the High Castle.
Right.
I've got that. When the tick comes out, I'll do it again.
Right.
I have no problem doing that. But when you have like a $10 price tag and you're giving me forcing commercials down my throat for something like this,
it's pretty shitty.
It is. And it makes me scared too, because there's a lot of cool things that they could do with this show. You know, I mean, lots of deep Star Trek fans don't really like him, but JJ really did create a new barrier to entry for a lot of new fans of Star Trek.
No, he got a lot of fans into it. I'm not a gigantic fan. I don't hate them, but I think he missed some of the beats. I think he turned it into a more of an action film, which is fine, you know, but I think the morals tales behind it is kind of missing. That's my only thing.
Yeah, I can definitely see that and agree with it.
Yeah. That's my only beef, if anything, you know.
Right.
I mean, there's a few other things, but...
All right, so stepping away from Star Trek a little bit, you told me something a couple of weeks ago. I just happened to see a Kickstarter, and I saw your name on that, and I realized you're an artist. You work in comic books, too.
I draw comics.
How have you never told me this before?
Well, you know,
seriously, man.
I'm honestly one of these guys that I don't like to get into everything about myself, because I think that's kind of boring just to talk about myself.
Well, you're on a podcast right now. The audience.
Well, today I will.
These guys want to hear about you.
Yeah, today I will. But yeah, I won't just throw it out and it's like, yeah, I draw comic books. What do you do? Oh, that's it. All right. No, I don't do that. So the Kickstarter was for we have a local Buffalo-based group called Visions that puts together artists and writers that are all working together to, you know, do their own thing, like put their own work together, and trying to basically. It's sort of a social network, but also we're publishing. So we put together an H.P. Lovecraft, basically dealing with older H.P. Lovecraft stories that aren't copyrighted.
Okay.
So a lot of his early stuff was never copyrighted. So we're taking some of those early stories and we turned them into comic book versions. And we did a Kickstarter, and it was funded, so it will be produced. You know, here.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. So we'll have that out in the next, in a couple months here. I don't know the exact deadline when it'll be printed, so I'm fuzzy on that detail.
Which ones of his stories are copyright? I mean, I'm assuming Shadow over Innsmouth, Dunwich Horror, At the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah. All those are copyrighted. I illustrated the Cats of Ultar. It's a short story.
Oh, I loved that one.
Yeah, it's a short story. I think it's only like 6 pages.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, no, for me, it's all I drew 6 pages. There's short stories, and there's oh gosh, I'm blanking on all the stories that we're on right now. But I mean, there are some of his earlier works that were in there. So I'll give you all the information for that, so you can look that up. On
sounds
show
good.
Notes.
Yeah, we'll keep covering this and let everybody know. Is it going to be available like online? How can we find this?
It's going to be printed, and I believe they'll probably have it out for the next Buffalo Comic Con.
Okay.
And we are going to try to have it so you can order it online.
That's what I meant.
I'm not quite sure what that is, because I mean, obviously it's not even printed yet. But it just got funded like a couple weeks ago.
Right.
So I'm a little fuzzy on the logistic details of it right now. So because it just happened.
Well, as long as we can get our grubby little hands on it, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, and I'll give you all the information. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So as far as our main topic that we want to talk about, I love comic books.
I do too.
I gave us a topic: 3 comic books that have changed our lives. Mm-hmm. All right, every single one of these, I can guarantee you guys are going to be able to find. If not on Comixology, you go to your local comic book shop. Go on fucking Midtown Comics. Hit up your brick and mortar first, but Midtown Comics, you can find all of these.
Sure.
So, comic books really kind of changed my life a little bit just growing up. I always loved to read. I always loved to write. But there was just something different about comics for me. I mean, I think most kids sit down with their comic books and everything. They just kind of get that feeling, web slinging with Spider-Man, kicking ass with the X-Men.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, when you really jump into comics, depending on what your first one is, it kind of takes on a whole new meaning and message to your life and kind of forms you as a person, too.
Yeah, I don't...
For better or for worse.
I started off with I don't remember the exact issue. It was in the hundreds of... the Avengers, and I was very, very young, like like 4. I don't know. It's very, very young. And I just remember just looking at those panels over and over again. You know,
Right.
I couldn't even read. You know, it was just one of those things that I just loved looking at it, and I would ask my mom what they're saying and stuff like that. So, and then it just grew from there. You know, I just would, you know, anytime I went to the local store, they had the comic rack, I'd pick up the comics, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's been part of my life.
Same here. I just, even from a little kid, and I really do believe that the first couple of comics that you pick up kind of sets that tone for what you look for. Even kind of what your personality ends up being. I mean, hell, my very first comic that I can ever remember buying was issue 1 of Shadows of the Bat.
Okay.
You know, I love Batman to this day, so maybe there is something to be said about my thesis, but darker book, more visceral, and I remember specifically Zaz was the big villain in that first issue.
Okay.
And obviously I love Batman to this day.
Batman.
And I'm still in for the gritty stories, man. That's
Yeah.
why I love me some Dark Knight.
My things got more obtuse as time went on. So like my examples you'll kind of start seeing.
Okay.
I got, there's certain books I don't think I followed any title per se for when I was very young. I think I just picked up like Spider-Man. I pick up, Avengers, Captain America, whatever. You know, it was just whatever the cover looked cool at the time, and I didn't really. And then all of a sudden, you know, you start picking up on certain story threads that like you're like, oh wow, this is really good. I like this, and for me being an artist, there's certain artists I just went for more than others. And I really just I got into how they would you know draw, because and there are some comics that the art, you know, whoever the artist was, it did nothing for me, and I stopped reading. So
art has always been a big thing for me. It has become less so lately. I can deal with much more abstract art lately, but I mean, especially starting out, you mentioned covers. That was a big thing for me.
Oh, sure.
You know, I would judge my comics that I'm going to pick up based on the covers, even if it was issue 15, and I would read it, and then I'd go back and try to find others.
Well, people say all the time that you know, a cover will make or break your issue. You could have the greatest story.
Sure.
You have the greatest story in the world.
For sure.
One of the story, I mean, unless there's a really good story like the Sandman series, I don't think the art is always superb in that. And Neil Gaiman's stories were so damn good. I could look past the art.
Yeah,
you know?
no matter what. There's a comic out right now called She-Wolf, where I think that the art, I mean, I'm sorry if anybody out there loves the art to this book, but I think the art is garbage in that book.
Yeah.
But the dialogue and the story is pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep reading, no matter what.
Well,
I can see past that.
I just picked up a collection, Eclipse, and it was about in the future. There was a solar flare, and people can't be out in the surface during the daytime. The art's beautiful, but the story is awful. Like
really,
some people like.
I almost picked that up too.
No, I would say not. If you want, I'll let you borrow it, and you can burn it in your backyard. No,
I think I might take you up on that.
The art's worth keeping. The art's really good.
Okay.
I don't remember the artist's name offhand right now, but I just was not a fan of the writing. I just thought the dialogue was forced. I thought the story was a little contrived, you know, and it just like it had a nice premise, but I don't know, you know. It goes both ways too. Like if I read a story that I think is just garbage and the art's good, I mean, it doesn't make the comic book any better for me either. So.
And the thing is, it used to for me. You know, if the art was good, like, for instance, Danger Girl or the ongoing series for Gen 13, the stories, looking back at them now, probably not the best, but there was something about J. Scott Campbell's art that just kind of made me feel tingly in my trousers as a young child, you know, all the way up to 13, 14. And it just worked for me. It did. Now I'm 31, and...
You don't get tingly like that anymore.
No.
Not there.
I look at Abby Chase and I'm like...
Right.
Yeah. You know? I mean, even Jim Lee's earlier stuff, too. You know, I'm seeing the darker, grittier look, and I'm like, chicks with guns. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, right.
Again, tingly in the nethers. I'm feeling it. Science is fun.
Right.
And now I live in a post-Sucker Punch world.
Right.
Where everything about that movie is stuff I should love. You know, I've got a hot blonde chick with a katana wearing a Catholic schoolgirl outfit. Gorgeous women with big fucking guns killing clockwork zombies. And that movie was an absolute abortion of a film. It was fucking terrible.
Yeah, I know, but it comes down to sometimes a story is very important. If you have a bad story, it just does not carry. Even if the art's really good, if the story is not at least somewhat interesting, or if the dialogue just seems intriguing enough,
right,
that can take you a long way. Like I said, Neil Gaiman's Sandman run is it's if you can if the story's good, the dialogue's good, it'll keep you reading it.
Oh God, yeah,
it'll keep you reading. So yeah.
So what do you think? Should we get to our list?
Absolutely.
3 comics apiece that have changed us.
Yes.
All right. You're my guest. You want to go first?
I'm going to go
first
with
one on your list.
I'm going to give it to you so you can look at it while I talk about it. Because
okay.
My first one, and this is, I'm giving you a copy of the book I had since I don't know how old I was.
Oh my God.
The cover's ripped off. This is The Death of Captain Marvel.
Wow.
This is by written, penciled, and inked by Jim Starlin. It came out in 1982. And it basically goes that it's Marvel Comics' first graphic novel that they ever came out with.
This is the first one?
Yes. It's their first graphic novel they ever published, 1982. So it takes place basically after Captain Marvel was maybe not the most popular hero, but he had these big cosmic battles. And what happened is he fought against a villain called Nitro, and Nitro he had this compound 13 nerve gas that was going to kill all these people, and Captain Marvel had to crush the top of the canister and stop the thing, but because he was exposed to the nerve gas, it gave him cancer. So he started dying of cancer in this book, and he's coming to terms with it. And all the heroes come to planet Titan, where he's from, or the moon Titan around Saturn, and to pay him tribute and say goodbye to him. And at the very end, just during his death, Thanos shows up to guide him into the world of death, because at this point Thanos was killed, and it was one of those books that I don't know what it was. I mean, obviously the art is very well done, because it was an unusual book at the time. It's not a standard comic, and it struck a chord in me. Every bit about it is the art is beautiful, the writing's compelling. It was totally different. A hero dying of cancer. It's just one of those things that's unheard of. Most times they get...
Yeah, it brings in, true morality.
Yeah.
Or mortality.
Mortality, yeah. So, and if you don't know who Captain Marvel is, Captain Marvel was a soldier for the Kree Empire. And he came to Earth as a recon to kind of observe, but then he found out that he kind of liked the Earth people more, and he became more of like a hero to them. He teamed up with the Avengers, and they fought against Thanos and all sorts of other cosmic threats. And he had this like real cosmic story, where he would just fly through space fighting bad guys. And it was very Guardians of the Galaxy in an early time, back in like the 70s and 80s. So
right on.
And I used to read his comics, especially the Jim Starlin's ones were just wonderful, just so fun. And here we go, like the Star Trek world, where you just felt like instead of a starship, you're just a superhero flying through space, super fast, getting to planets and doing all. I mean, it was great. It was just so cool to see. So, the creator of this, Jim Starlin, he created Thanos, Drax the Destroyer, Gamora. He revamped Captain Marvel, Adam Warlock, and stuff like that. So, just this cool stuff. I mean, you can't do any, at that age. I don't know what I was, maybe 2. I had to be around like 6 or 7 years old. I just was like,
oh shit.
I was like, this is awesome. It's just, I just loved it. I just dug it. And I just like, I couldn't get enough of it. So yeah, it was a great book. And this is my original book. It just all torn up.
Wow.
The
original first the original time you bought this. Did you ever go back and re-buy this just to have a better quality one?
You know, they don't make it like that anymore, and I think it comes with a collection. And I've thought about it here and there, but it just I just love it.
I mean, I would never get rid of that. The nostalgia alone.
I might tape the cover back onto the front of it, but it's mostly put away for the most part. I bring it out every once in a while just to take a look. In fact, you know, when you asked me about, you know, the subject that you want to do, I literally went through all these like boxes, like, okay, like which ones are the most influential? And I had to really think about
which ones really changed me.
Yeah. Like, so this was one of those things I just thought it was just, for me was amazing. A beautiful work. So.
Excellent. I'm going to be honest with you. This was the topic that I decided to come up with as our main topic for this episode, and I had such a difficult time with this for myself.
It's hard. It's like it's like picking children. I can't.
It is.
Like, what's your favorite child? Well, I can't pick that. Mm-hmm. You know?
I mean, do I go Preacher? Do I go Scott Pilgrim? Do I go Crimson? And all three of those were on my list at one point. I mean, especially Crimson by Humberto Ramos.
Right.
That was absolutely on my list. It did get knocked out. Yeah. You know, honorable mention to it, but it did get knocked out.
I got some honorable mentions too. So,
all right, we'll do some honorable mentions at the end.
Right.
First one that I've got. Unfortunately, they're actually in storage, so I don't. This is the only one I don't have a copy of to slap on the table here. But The Savage Dragon.
Okay. Yeah. It's beautiful. I love that. Image
Comics was formed in 1992 by a bunch of people that split off of Marvel.
Yeah.
You got Todd McFarlane, you've got Silvestri, you've got Jim Lee, you've got Rob Liefeld, and finally Eric Larson.
Yeah, Larson, yeah.
And they all created their own little subgroups under the Image umbrella, from, you know, Top Cow to Wildstorm, and Eric Larson's was Homage Studios. Mm-hmm. And The Savage Dragon, I've always loved dragons. Mm-hmm. So I remember going into a comic book shop and
seeing Savage Dragon.
Exactly. And I'm seeing this big muscular green dude with a big fin on his head.
Yeah, like a mohawk.
Exactly. And I was there.
Yeah.
So I remember picking this comic up, and I remember how difficult it was to buy this book. Because I was born in 1985. The book really came out in 1992. So as the ongoing series is coming up, I'm not even 10 years old yet.
Right.
Okay. This book, especially for the time, was extremely risque.
Okay.
There was blood everywhere. There were broken bones everywhere. The general plot of this book is this guy named Officer Dragon was found in a burning field by a police officer. He wasn't Officer Dragon at the time. He was just a dude, green with a fin on his head. He was found in a burning field by an officer. He has amnesia. He was taken in, you know, cleaned up, given some meals and everything, and decided to join the police department in Chicago to fight against this upcoming mutant threat that was overwhelming the city. Mm-hmm. You know, you've got terrible people and these horrible, like, mafia-like gangs composed entirely of mutants. Names like Cyberface, Overlord, Mako. Obviously, Mako's a shark dude, but... And now the Chicago police has their own super weapon to battle these mutants that are overrunning Chicago. The Savage Dragon. And this book was brutal, man, with broken bones everywhere, blood flying everywhere. In the original 3-issue arc, there was even a girl that lived in his apartment building named Debbie that you find out at the very end he brought into the house, had sex with, and she ended up dead. And it becomes, during the ongoing series, it becomes a mystery and kind of like a minor, yet not so minor plot point about what happened to this girl, and her mother is trying to ruin his life and everything, and it ends pretty weird.
It's pretty heavy for a young kid to be reading this.
Looking back on it now, I completely agree. There are boobs all over the place. There's sex all over the place. And I remember specifically the owners of this comic book shop that I used to go to in Corning, New York. It was called Comics for Collectors. They would never sell it to me unless my mother was there and looked at the comic first.
Really?
They would never sell me this comic.
Wow.
They never would sell me this comic. And there were a few issues I actually had to ask some of my older friends in school to go get.
Because there was something in it that was...
That's exactly right. I remember specifically issue 8 and issue 16, because issue 16 had a variant version of it where there's a shower scene between Dragon and his hooker girlfriend named Rapture.
Nice.
Who... had an outfit that didn't even have like straps along the top. They just some fabric that covered her nipples on her breasts. And they even I remember specifically, they even make a plot point of there. How do you get your outfit to stay on? Static electricity. It clings. And her ability was electricity. So looking back on it now, I get it. I get why I wasn't allowed to. But I was so pissed off at the time.
Right.
You know, why can't I read my comic books? And I started collecting all of the offshoots of that, from Dart to Star, Super Patriot, which was super bloody. And aside from me loving dragons and being introduced very early on to an extremely adult subject matter, because Image Comics was not exactly for kids. Right. You know? And again, being a kid, I didn't realize that, nor did I agree with it. I agree with it now.
Right.
But this comic specifically helped me with my vocabulary.
Yeah.
It helped me with understanding complex issues, even as a kid, you know, because there was a lot of racism in these comic books. You know, the KKK was a major bad guy in both this and other books that were going on at the time.
Right.
You know, the Covenant of the Sword, learning words like covenant when you're only 8 years old.
Absolutely.
You know, it blew away my teachers, me being able to speak like that and actually pronouncing the words right.
It is a wonderful thing about comics that if a kid really gets into comics and reads them, I do think it opens up a whole different world of a vocabulary, the outside world that they're not usually shown. I think there's one of my favorite growing up was Fantastic Four, especially when John Byrne was writing and drawing it, and he would have these like Shakespeare quotes and stuff like that in the beginning of it, and it would be just wonderful because I was like, I don't know who that is, and I'd go look up in the, you know, back when you had the Encyclopedia Britannica,
right?
You're like, who's that? You know, and look it up. Like, who's that person? You know, it's just little things like little breadcrumbs they'd give you, and you follow that. So like, if you're like learning the word covenant, if you're learning about, you know, racism and, you know, the Ku Klux Klan, stuff like that, it's like stuff you're just not exposed to because that's not your life.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You know, and my favorite story about the Savage Dragon came when I was in 5th grade. We had these oversized reading books for our reading group, you know, basically like English class, and when I was in middle school. And I was such a nerd. I did my homework in class even, you know, even before I went home. Wow. That way I could fuck around, play video games, and read comic books all night. I always had my homework done, straight A's and everything. And I remember one day I'm sitting at reading group, and we were supposed to just be reading our story and everything and then working on our questions. I had already done it, and I had already finished all my questions, so I've got my comic books that I think I'm so sly about hidden inside my book, and I'm just sitting there reading The Savage Dragon during my English class. And this was the first time I ever talked with Hobart from Couldn't Be Models.
Oh, jeez.
He walks by, looks down, goes, sharpens his pencil, then walks by again on his way back to his seat and just kicks my chair. And I look up at him, and I'm like all pissed off.
Like, what are you doing? Yeah.
He looks down at me. Spawn could kick Savage Dragon's ass, and sits down. And I was so flustered. He just flashes me this big smile, shows me he's doing the exact same thing.
That's hilarious.
He was reading Spawn the exact same way I was reading The Savage Dragon.
That's
another
awesome.
Image book from the original creators.
Of course, yeah.
And from that day forward, we were best friends.
That's awesome. Wow.
So,
what a wonderful way to kick off a friendship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Both of us reading very mature books when we were not even 12 years old yet.
Yeah, Spawn wasn't for young kids either.
Again, talking about the KKK, you know, the nature of heaven and hell.
Yeah.
You know,
that
Spawn almost made it on this list too.
Yeah, Spawn is a heavy comic.
Very heavy comic.
Yeah.
Very heavy comic, very heavy animated series. The movie, not so much.
Let's not talk about the movie.
No. We'll get to the movie some other episode. But that one was my first pick.
Did they have that in a Tribeca collection for Savage Dragon?
They do. They have multiple collections. I don't know if they started out with the original series, but I do know that they have some collections of Savage Dragon out there.
Yeah, I've picked it up once in a while. I haven't followed as much as you did, but I do like Eric Larson's work, and I always have. So
it is one of the only 2 original books that are still going. The only 2 books that are still going actually are Savage Dragon and Spawn.
Which is pretty amazing that that's still a thing, you know.
1992, can you believe it?
Yeah.
1992 it came out. So over 20
Yeah,
years.
he's still doing it. It's wonderful that he's still doing it. Yeah, yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
So what's your second one?
Remember, David Lynch is Dune. Well, this is
I do.
This is Mobius. This is the guy who really, the French artist. He did the Airtight Garage. He did it. He obviously, like I said, he's French. His real name is Jean Girard, and he would release these stories in this French comic called Metal Hurlant. And then that was back in between 1976 to 1979. But then he released it to Heavy Metal magazine in 1977.
Oh, I used to read the shit out of Heavy Metal.
Yeah, so Heavy Metal is kind of like, you get these small stories, maybe 8-page stories, and basically it's then it got collected, and I picked it up. Marvel published it in 1987, and this is when sometime when I picked it. I might have picked up in like 88 or 89. I picked up at the comic book shop, and I have other ones, but this was they have, like, this book is literally, you see it on Amazon that you're looking at. It's going for like $80.
Really?
Yeah, and mine probably isn't, because mine beat up because I used to read the shit out of it.
I was about to say, I'll be a lot more careful as I'm looking through this thing.
I mean, it's not. I know you're not going to destroy it. The basic idea is that the Garage is an asteroid in the constellation Leo, and it is orbiting this asteroid is a man named Major Grubert, and he oversees the world of the Garage, and he's sort of a god figure, Major Grubert. He's dresses like he's in an old colonial uniform. He wears a pointed colonial hat, and the world has these multiple levels, 3 levels that deals with the unconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious. And it takes place about this machine that gets broken, and the guy who runs away from taking any kind of responsibility for fixing the machine. Major Grubert goes to investigate on it, and he basically has to go further into the world. And they have what's interesting about this, it doesn't read like a linear story. I mean, there is a linear story to it, but you'll have characters that will start and then they just kind of disappear. Like, what happened with that character? You don't, like, a story's like dead end. You have all these like offshoot stories that will dead end to nothing. You'll have characters that literally will change the way they look, change their genders, like, and there won't be like a big explanation. You just kind of put the dots together, and it's almost a stream of conscious. It's almost like listening to someone play jazz. It's not necessarily a comic book just that you'd pick up like in a normal store and be like, oh, let's read this. So
when you're using the jazz comparison, like almost like a living, breathing art form type deal.
Yes, exactly. It's not meant to be.
It's like jazz made comic form.
Yeah. So when you listen,
I like that. That's cool.
Oh, and that's
cool.
It's very different, and you saw some of the pictures, and I mean, obviously, it has a '70s look to it. It's a little funky. It has some interesting. I guess in some ways it's a little dated with the artwork and stuff like that, but still, it's just one of these comics that it's visually arresting. I love the idea that the story is not linear. It kind of jumps all over the place, and I just have so much fun, and I still have so much fun looking at it. I mean, he has other books that are out there that are just as interesting, but this one I just think is just beautiful. Wonderful in so many ways that unfortunately you probably can't get Mobius stuff. I know they do have some collections out there that you might be able to get, but like this book I have, Mobius 3, you can't. I mean, you can buy them, but they're obviously
expensive,
oodles of money,
right?
So it's a masterpiece, and I knew it when I saw it. I didn't understand it when I saw it, and it's one of those things I just read and reread and just poured over the pages and like, oh, look how he rendered this person, look how he did this piece of machinery, this background scenery, and,
right.
And it just was one of those things. It's like, it's just a visual feast. The story's interesting, and I think it's pivoted me away from, and at the time comics were taking that pivot maybe more away from the superhero genre, And it's not that I had any problem with the superhero genre. It's just that it's like, this was like, wow, this is totally different. This is not like anything I've ever seen before. So
I've got to say, just flipping through this book here, I can already see influences art-wise in some of the comics that I read today, specifically the back vignette stories in the comic book Harrow County, published by Dark Horse. The art is very different in those little vignette stories in the back, and it's very reminiscent of what I just saw in this book here. And so you can see the
probably
influences of
drawing from
Mobius to this day.
Oh, yeah. And, he just recently passed away. Just a little, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I don't remember the exact year he passed away, but he's just one of those treasured artists that will always. What he did is so amazing and so refreshing compared to anything else that you normally would see.
Yeah, especially coming from someone that grew up with J. Scott Campbell and Michael Turner.
Yeah. Okay. So
big tits and guns. That was my growing up.
I mean, there's a place for that. There's a place for that in comic books, and it's not that I have any issue with that. It's just that as a young kid growing up, you see a lot of that stuff. You see a lot of the superhero books, and it's not that I ever get totally tired of it. It's just that you see something totally different. You're like, wow, this is not like what I expect.
Right.
I find that more and more I get into things that I just don't something that just out of left field, and I'm like, that's totally genius. I never thought of that.
Right.
So that's one of those books that it just blew me away, and it's still one of those books I still pick up and just look through, and it's like, to come up with ideas, it's like a home base. I just go back because it's like, I just love looking at this.
Everybody has those touchstones in whatever art you go throughout your life living, whether it be podcasting, whether it be filmmaking, whether it be creating comics, whether it's like you and me where we do multiple different things,
right.
All artistic wise, we all have those touchstones.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to go back to them.
Yeah.
Just feel safe for a couple of minutes and then go out and do what you do.
That is exactly. I mean, there will be times where I, maybe had a rough day, and I'll just sit down and I'll pick up one of these books that I do adore, and I just go through it and just look at it, and I feel like I'm, 11 years old, 12 years old again, or, just for the moment, and then I go on to my whatever else I got to handle. So,
yeah, my next choice is very much like that for me too. This one is one of my touchstones. Okay. You brought up superheroes. Aside from Batman has always been my one vice as far as superhero books.
That's fine.
I've never loved Superman. I've never loved... Spoiler alert for next week, we're going to be doing our review of Logan, and that one makes me apologize profusely for this statement here, but I've always hated Wolverine. I've never been behind him. I hated the movies. He was my least favorite character in the show. Hated him in the comic books. Logan is religion, but more on that next week. But there was one specific superhero book that was very unconventional, and a lot of people probably have not heard of it. And this one kind of, to me, set the superhero genre on its head, and that was yet another Image book called Rising Stars by J. Michael Straczynski.
I don't think I've ever read this.
Straczynski, for those of you who don't know him out there, you probably might have at least heard of the TV show Babylon 5.
Right.
And that was his show. This book was suggested to me when it was already about 4 issues out. It was suggested by a couple of my friends that I was growing up with reading comics. I just realized that my list is very much chronological through my life.
Sure.
My last one is going to be very recent. But this book really kind of tipped the superheroes on its head for me. The story of Rising Stars is a comet crashes down in a very small town. And all the children that are in utero at that time end up developing abnormal powers as they're very, very small.
Cool.
And some of them are just powers that you wouldn't even think of. There's one girl that has telekinesis, but only for things about as small or smaller as a pea. That's the only type of things that she can manipulate. One woman is the most beautiful woman in the world to whoever views her. So some people may see her as Eliza Dushku. Somebody might see her as Blake Lively, something like that.
Wow.
You've got a man that's completely invulnerable. You've got, obviously, your usual tropes. Your Captain America super strong and can fly types. Your guys that can only fly types. Any type of power that you think of, these kids have. One woman is the best singer in the world to anybody who hears her. What I love about this book is that it shows how flawed every single one of these are, and not in a Watchmen type way, but it shows how damaged they are, how the powers affect them. I mentioned the invulnerable man. This guy cannot taste. This guy cannot feel pain. This guy cannot feel physical sensation or pleasure. And you would think that this would make him an unstoppable force. It doesn't. He only can just fall over. People tried to sign him up for football and thinking, oh, well, he's invulnerable. He can just run the ball right through him. No, people can still tackle him. He just can't feel it. Yeah. There's a force field around him. He'll never have a broken bone,
right.
But that's it. I believe I said that he can't taste. That's not actually accurate. That's the only thing that he can do is taste. Which is why he becomes morbidly obese. It's the one thing that he can do that ties him to this world is taste things.
So when you read this, around what age?
I started reading this around 14, 15 years old.
And what about it captured your imagination more than anything? I mean, because obviously you're a Batman fan, you know,
right?
You like this must have a gritty side to it.
It does. This is a story told in 3 parts: the origin, the rise, and then the fall of these 144 special kids. Mm-hmm. It starts out as their children, where they're developing their powers, they're figuring out what's going on, and it's told through the perspective of a man that goes by the name of Poet. His real name in the book is John. Mm-hmm. He was the last child that got in under the wire because he was conceived at the moment that the asteroid hit. So he's tethered to whatever gave them their powers more than anybody else. He's almost like the catalyst to these powers, and everything is told through his story. This story talks about the murder of a lot of these specials and what ends up happening. I'm just going to give a little bit of background because I don't want to spoil the story for anybody that might be interested. Yeah. Because the trades are out there, these books are out there, and they're actually very cheap too. Okay. You can find them like on Midtown for about $1 a piece, most of these.
Oh, cool.
You find out that as the specials start dying, the powers that the other ones have start amplifying, and more abilities are granted to them. The power that they have is not infinite. It is very, very finite. So they find out that they're actually using up their powers. The stronger and the more badass some of these people are, the more power it drains out of the entire group. So as they start dying, that power that person had is evenly dispersed throughout the rest of them.
Okay.
So some of the greedy ones start killing off specials to get more power.
Little Highlander thing going on.
Exactly. This whole there can be only one. This book ends up getting political toward the end as well, as the government tries to kill the specials because they fear them. There's just so much to do with this book. It's very personal stories. Mm-hmm. There are love stories involved. There are hate stories involved. There are murder mysteries. There's espionage. The whole thesis of this book is building a better world. What is the reason that they have these powers? How was the world when they came into it, and how can they leave and make it better?
Is it more
of fear that everybody has about them too?
Is it more how each person interprets how their power should be used in the world and what their meaning is?
That is in the book. It's not for each and every one of them. But,
sure. Well, 144, you can't probably go through every one.
Exactly. But you'd be shocked at how many it does go through. But yeah, it does touch on that as well. Okay. I mean, the most beautiful woman in the world, her name in this book is Chandra, and it does touch on the fact that she's the most beautiful woman in the world to everyone who sees her, but she doesn't see anything when she looks in the mirror. And you find out that everybody just wants to be with her just due to her physical looks. Uh-huh. And there's only one person in the world that actually sees her the way she was born, because he's the only person that actually ever saw her for her. And it talks about the loneliness that she feels in everyday life.
Interesting.
She goes to an extreme at one point by making everybody in the room wear masks so that nobody else can see each other. I just think that this book is masterfully written.
Yeah, it sounds really, really intelligently written, and it sounds like it has so much, like I said, what I love about Star Trek, subtext to everything.
Yeah, there are layers upon layers in this book. There are only 24 issues of the actual story. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of spin-offs, and I haven't read them. But I mean, this is a book to pick up.
Did he finish everything?
Yes.
The story was wrapped up.
Yes, the story was definitely
was
wrapped
never
up.
Canceled or anything like
nope.
that. Yeah,
nope.
Cool.
It reached its logical conclusion.
Awesome.
Luckily.
Nice. That's unusual. That's wonderful. I will definitely pick that up. It sounds fascinating. You know what? I don't even know. Maybe I had seen it, but Rising Stars does sound like something I've seen, but I don't know if I'd actually ever picked one of them up.
Yeah, this is one of those sleeper books where lots of people have heard of it or at least recognize a cover.
Right.
But not a lot of people that I've talked to have actually read it. And this book in particular, got a lot of my friends who weren't ever into comics.
Into comics?
Into comics.
It's cool that you could find something like that. I love when I can find something that's so unique that nobody else had seen before or nobody else had heard before, and then it gets them thinking in a totally different manner. You know?
Right.
It's wonderful when that does happen because, go back 10, 15 years ago. I mean, comic books were getting more popular, of course.
Yeah, they were.
But they weren't totally mainstream yet. Now, today, I'd almost consider them very mainstream.
Well, when you've got something like The Walking Dead out there,
sure,
I mean, so many of these are being adapted. You've got The Walking Dead, you've got Outcasts, obviously Batman, the X-Men movies. Yeah, I would say that they're very much mainstream.
Right, and I think the movies obviously brought a lot of people in for sure, and now we have the TV shows. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And I'm sure there has been an uptick on comic sales for things.
There's got to be.
But I don't know if you get past the big names and the big characters, like does it trickle down to the smaller titles that might, that's what I wonder. Like if there's more people out there picking up offbeat books.
I would almost like to say yes. I mean, if only just for myself and the conversations that I have whenever I go out to a comic book shop, you know? I mean, a good example is the book Nailbiter. Brooke, she never really got into comic books, and when I told her that I read comics, she just assumed I read Spider-Man and the X-Men and everything like that. And just because I like those movies. And I told her one day, you need to sit down and read this. And I just slapped a couple of trades of Nailbiter in front of her. Mm-hmm. And she looked over at them. She's like, I've never heard of this, whatever. And she got really, really bored one day. Mm-hmm. And
she
decided to pick it up.
Incredibly bored.
3 hours later, she bursts into the room after reading all of them twice, and she just smacks them down on the bed, and she goes, wait a minute, this counts?
Yeah.
This is what you're reading? This counts? What else do you have here?
Yeah.
And she was off to the races, man.
Yeah.
I mean, now she reads most of the same stuff that I do. Scott Pilgrim, Saga, Nailbiter, Birthright.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of wonderful stuff out there. There's no doubt about that.
There is. I mean, and to this day, lots of people, when they hear the word comic books,
they think Spider-Man, Superman.
Exactly.
That's what you're reading.
And
you might be reading that.
Yeah, but
and there's nothing wrong with it.
Not even at all. But there's such a world of comics out there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a medium that can tell stories in a way that nothing else can.
Absolutely. There's so much more that you can do visually, that you can show people different, pictures and ideas and worlds.
Yes.
And I think it frees the writer up too, that,
agreed.
They can go in and they can tell a story and improve their dialogue and build a bigger world and that kind of deal. So that's wonderful. I'm going to definitely look that up and order that on Amazon next time I get a chance here.
Yeah,
so,
I highly recommend it.
That's wonderful. My next book is an artist that you might know. He does... He is the artist that has done Ghost in the Shell.
Love Ghost in the Shell.
So this was the book he did before. It's called Appleseed.
Okay.
Appleseed it came out in the 85, and I don't know exactly when I picked this up, but this is probably late 80s, if not early 90s. And what struck me about Appleseed was more of, it's a world building on one end, that it's because especially the book you're holding, and he did multiple books, of course, but it had to do with the idea of it, and maybe it's a tired trope in some ways, but is that mankind living after World War III builds a supercomputer in a city that's supposed to be like a utopia.
Okay.
And they are trying to find a balance with, they have regular humans and they have bioroids, which are like mechanical humans. And the mechanical humans are kind of perfectly balanced. They're not quite, I don't want to call them like androids or anything like that, but they're so similar to humans, but they're almost perfect. Humans are imperfect, and they are becoming, I don't want to say lazy, but they get kind of like they either become too materialistic, they become too into partying and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff. But they find that it's kind of tearing apart the idea of utopia. And the supercomputer decides it's going to start destroying people because of that. And the story slowly goes that they're supposed to stop the supercomputer. The story itself is interesting, but it's everything about it. It's the characters that comes in. It's the humor. It's the art itself. Just entranced me. And,
oh God, yeah. I just kind of thumbed through this. I decided to put it down because I'm going to be ordering this.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's wonderful, and you can't. The artist is Masamune Shirow is so. I don't even know how to describe him. He has such a technical side of him. He has books where he just like draws schematics of his giant mech warriors or armor or guns and stuff like that. And then he does books of erotic art. Yeah, I mean, and you're just like, well, how does that,
And then he decides to marry the two of them and do erotic mech.
Yeah, and so, and you have these wonderful characters that come together.
Just picturing Jaegers with giant breasts fighting kaijus.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. But
I'd watch that.
That'd be a lot of fun to see. I don't know how it work it out logistically, but at a young age, I like our previous episode when we talked about on Dune, we talked about Akira, and I do like Akira for a lot of reasons, but this gave me a more of a, I don't know how to put it. There's more of a military slant to it, where Akira's like a bunch of punks on the street riding motorcycles and stuff like that.
It was far more gangland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. This is more of like he's trying to settle the ideas of what society is and should be, or what could be, and in the meantime, trying to keep it a little bit light, not being too heavy-handed. And I'll admit the story is not stellar. It's okay, but the artistic style of it is so amazing. And I think this is sort of his primer before he got in, because after this, I think he did Orion, which is okay, but his art style is getting even better. And then he did Ghost in the Shell, and I think I brought Ghost in the Shell here to show you too. But
Ghost in the Shell is just incredible.
Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Oh my God, it was good.
Yeah, and this was made into a anime movie as well, or manga movie.
I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and there's a new one too, which it's all CGI. I'm not really crazy about because it's just very CGI. It looks like watching a video game.
Right.
It's not. I don't know. I didn't watch all of it, but it looked okay. But this book per se, just like I said, the images were just so wonderful, and getting lost in his head. It was just one of those things I just couldn't get away from, and I just love seeing it. You know?
Honestly, just looking at the hairstyles as I'm flipping through this, it feels like I'd be reading the comic book of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, but look at look at the structures he builds and stuff like that, and just his rendering.
Yeah, the art is excellent.
Oh, it blows your mind, and it's what you expect from most manga. And what's wonderful too is the more and more he gets into it, he really starts, his art even gets better, and I'll show you maybe later just the different styles. From it gets like more of that older style manga, and then he really jumps into a more modern style. And I don't know, maybe he had a big studio behind him that he could do more of that stuff, because a lot of these guys, they don't work by themselves.
Right on.
They have like
they've got a team,
16 artists working on it with something. So but yeah, it's just one of those books that was just I was like, oh, it hit me at the right age. It had giant machines, things blowing up. It had enough of a story that I could be like, wow, this is fun to read. It's action packed, and it has a little bit of a message, so that's all I needed. So at
Excellent.
the time, so most of my stuff is kind of visually on the visual side of things. So
whereas most of mine have been like personal stories and just the plot of it itself.
Yeah, well, that's important too.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
that's important. Absolutely.
All right, my final one. I have always been a huge horror fan.
Yeah.
And I've also always been a big comic book fan. However, weirdly enough, I always hated horror comic books. I was always disappointed. I always found them hokey. There was nothing frightening about them. There was nothing jarring about them. If anything, I just found them boring. So I got to the point where I would just avoid horror comics.
Well, a lot of them are kind of goofy. I mean, once in a while they'll have a good story, but...
Up to the point where I found this last one on my list, I never found one. Mm-hmm. And after I read this, I went out to seek them out, and I have found some absolute gems, but there has not been one book that has been, in my opinion, more well thought out, well crafted than Lock and Key by Joe Hill.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I love this book.
Mm-hmm.
And it blows my mind how this book has, to this day, never actually been adapted. Although now Joe Hill is back in the writer's chair and he's writing the pilot for, hopefully, the new series that's going to be getting picked up. IDW Entertainment is sponsoring it.
Okay.
So it's got financing behind it.
Yeah.
We just need to find an outlet for it, and Joe Hill is actually going to be writing it.
Cool.
So, but Lock and Key, to those out there who don't know this story...
Yeah, it's a wonderful story.
First off, just fucking buy it. But if you need a little bit of an explanation on why, the whole thesis of this book is there's a house called the Key House in New England. Because, of course, it's New England. It's written by Stephen King's son, so it's got to be in New England. There are these keys that open doors to just unbelievable things. All right, there is a key that opens a door that lets your spirit leave the body and lets you astral project. There's a key that makes you as big as a fucking kaiju. There is a key that releases shadows to do your bidding. And as soon as you leave this house, after you're 18 years old, you have no memory of any of these abilities in this house.
Yeah.
And these kids find the keys after they end up moving into this house after a horrible, horrible crime is committed against their family. Mm-hmm. And ultimately their dad ends up dying. But you find out very quickly that they're not the only person that knows about these keys. Mm-hmm. There's a demon after them as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really spoiling anything because I believe that was covered in the first issue.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't get you, I don't know what will. There are 6 volumes in this book. It's been released a couple of different ways. You need to pick this up, especially before Joe Hill finally gets this show made.
Yeah. Because
this is an adaptation I want to see. They made a version of it back in 2011. They made a pilot for it.
Oh, did they? I didn't know that. I did not know that.
You can go on YouTube right now and see the trailer for it.
Huh.
They made a pilot. Fox decided not to pick it up because it was, and I quote, too scary. We now live in a world of American Horror Story.
Yeah, American Horror Story, all sorts of shows like that. It's
exactly.
Like, come on.
They can't use this excuse anymore.
Well, just throw it to Netflix and it'll be the greatest thing that ever happened.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I could not agree. Netflix is already becoming like the comic book shop place, you know, as well as the CW.
Yeah.
You know, the CW's got the DC shows. Netflix now has the Marvel shows.
Yep.
Pick one of the two.
Absolutely.
I'd be fine with Netflix. Or if you want to get crazy, what is it? Cinemax has Outcast? Go to Cinemax.
Absolutely.
They've already got a scary show on the Outcast.
HBO,
I would be fine with that as well.
Yeah.
You know, I need this to get made because there's only been one adaptation of Joe Hill's stuff that has gotten something, and that was Horns.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah. That's cool. I did enjoy that. I don't know if I would have put it in my top, 3 that influenced me, but I maybe because I was just a little bit older, but it's a very cool book for sure.
Now, the biggest reason that I put this into my top 3 is the storytelling that Joe Hill uses in it. Mm-hmm. I think that it's brilliant storytelling. It actually made a comic book scary to me. It made me go back and seek out other horror comics just to see how those stories are told.
Gotcha.
I don't get to reading Nailbiter if I don't pick up Lock and Key.
Gotcha.
That was how important this book was to me.
Because, everything on my list, I'm not going to say that they are superb on, some people might pick up Mobius and be like, this is just some guy tripping on acid drawing comics. And maybe that's all it is. But to me, at a certain point, it hit me so hard, like a ton of bricks. It was, I can't get away from it. I always circle back to it, so there are certain comics. And, like I said, I was going through a ton of my comics like, oh, this is really good, but I don't know if this is the comic,
Mm-hmm.
So it was very difficult for me to pick the comic, to be like,
right.
And these were when I was younger, like, I was becoming a teenager, and I was a teenager, and these were things I was consuming, and that was totally so there. And I have some, I brought some runners up that I can show you too, but these, mine might seem offbeat to a lot of people. The death of Captain Marvel,
They may.
Yeah. But I'm just saying these were like stunning to me at the time.
Exactly. And the last personal thing about picking up Lock and Key is there was a long hiatus in between reading comic books for me. I got out of comics at probably about 18, and I got back into them at about 28, give or take. So there was probably 10 years where I just didn't pick up comics. And Lock and Key was the very first comic I decided to pick up.
That's cool.
That was the very first one. I picked up this graphic novel, and I went back to pick up the random back issues of stories I used to read when I was younger just to finish them out. Because I'm a completionist that way.
Yeah, you want to get the full story. You want to have all the back issues.
Exactly. Went back, tried to reacquire Battle Chasers, picked up the rest of Crimson, which is in one of my honorable mentions. I'll touch on that in a minute. So picked up a lot of those, but this was the very first new book that I picked up, just because I knew the name Joe Hill, and I decided to give it a shot.
No, it's a wonderful book.
And it opened so many doors for me, and this is something I've gone back and read 4 different times now, and each time I find something new.
Yeah.
I find something interesting, and Gabriel Rodriguez's art, I think, is stunning, and it fits the story perfectly. He's
a great art. No, it is a wonderful package altogether. You don't get much better than that, especially nowadays. There's a lot of great comic books out there, but that was one of those comics that just hits you. You're like, wow, this is wonderfully done.
Instant classic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instant classic.
I agree completely. I'm just going to show you my runners up just because.
Yeah, by all means.
And the first one is Charles Burns' Black Hole.
Okay.
This is another, to me, visually arresting book. It's all about a bunch of teenagers in high school who end up getting a sexually transmitted disease that mutate them, and it's just fascinating. There's not any real overall conspiracies or anything other than these kids are getting these like I said, sexually transmitted disease that are getting the mutations. They go into hiding because they turn into freaks. Some people, their mutations aren't anything terrible, so they can kind of like hang around with the normal people. But the artwork is just unbelievable. The story is very well told. It is one of those classic books out there for indie comics.
Yeah, it seems like the book that might have influenced the Beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. It's influenced a lot of people, and it's influenced me. Yeah.
Yeah, this is chilling, the art in here. This is really good.
Yeah, it's totally different. It's unusual compared to most stuff. The other one I have here, and these were all books I kind of like were introduced later on. This is Love and Rockets. Especially, I love. There's a whole bunch of different brothers that work together, but Jamie Hernandez is one of the main guys I like to follow. I like his style. I like his story. They're sort of I don't want to say a soap opera-ish, but it follows a story about a bunch of girls and their kind of misadventures through life. And it's just one of those things that it has nothing to do with really superheroes. It's just taking drugs, getting drunk, having sex, playing in rock bands, and just crazy shit that happens along the way. So
excellent.
It's just fun, and there's touching moments, there's funny moments. It's very human, and the art, like I said, is just really stunning. And he huge volumes of work with him. So, and his brothers too. So, any Love and Rockets is going to be pretty well done.
Excellent.
The other one I want to just throw out is Evan Dorkin. He did Milk and Cheese, Hectic Planet, Dork.
This takes me back. I used to read this.
Yeah, this is when I was in the early 90s. I don't know if this is collected at all. I have all the issues, but they were so ridiculous and so much fun.
Over the top.
Yeah, it's so juvenile, idiotic. You just gotta love it for what it is.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on this one.
It's just hilarious.
This one takes me back.
Yeah. So those are my honorable mentions for comics. I could go on, but
Oh, my honorable mentions list could be a fucking mile long. Some of the ones that I want to bring up, Crimson, obviously. I talked about that one.
Crimson's great.
Yeah, Humberto Ramos, essentially the story of a teenager that becomes a vampire and is introduced into the world of the struggle between good and evil, Gregories, Seraphim, vampire hunters, lycanthropes, and interesting, the spirit of St. George. And it's done by the artist of Invader Zim, so you got that for you.
Yeah.
It's just an excellent book.
Yeah,
excellent book.
That's wonderful.
Another one that I really need to mention, Why the Last Man.
Oh, yeah. It's a wonderful book.
Brian K. Vaughan on that one.
Yeah.
This book takes the apocalypse to a whole new level. A gender side, if you will.
Yeah.
All the males in the world are killed except for a man and his monkey named Ampersand.
Yep.
And they were able to do 6 full volumes of this, and this, oh my God, it's so good. I stutter with my words on these just because I can't gush about how good these are.
You don't know where to start, too, with some of them, because it's like the stories are pretty in-depth for a lot of them.
Extremely.
I never followed Why the Last Man all the way through. I picked up certain issues, and I don't think I followed. So there's a lot, I think, especially the ending, I never really got to it. So, but it is a wonderful done book. I do enjoy it. I just one of those things I never followed completely through with.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last one on my list here is Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim. I used to love this movie, and then I picked up the comic.
Okay.
Now the movie is unwatchable just because of how good this book is.
Yeah, the comic's awesome.
The surrealist nature, the absurdist comedy, the way that they present characters to you as if it's both in a video game and in a dating show. The commentary that this gives about just a young guy that's just living in Arrested Development. Mm-hmm. And all he wants to do is date this one girl, but her evil exes just keep on popping up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And he levels up like he's in a video game. It's just such a fun book.
No, it's a fun,
such a fun read.
Yeah, it is a fun book, and I mean, I appreciate the movie for what it is too. Yeah,
I used to appreciate the movie for what it is, and then I read the book, and then I just have a problem with this movie on almost every level, except for the casting of Ramona. The casting of Ramona is the only thing I can be down with.
My thing is, like, a lot of people, any kind of movie usually hacks apart the real story.
It does.
I mean, like Watchmen, it's like, I love Watchmen, the actual, like, Alan Moore's story for the Watchmen. Mm-hmm. And maybe they could have done a little better with the movie, but I think pretty good for what it is.
Pretty good for what it is. Agreed.
Like 300, I have all the original comics for that. I think they got pretty close to the mark for 300.
That one is probably one of the better adaptations.
Now it's a little simpler too compared to Watchmen. Watchmen was a very dense book.
Yes.
And I mean, then there were other books, especially Alan Moore's. Alan Moore's always get killed. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was awful. The book is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's a ton of movies. So I give movies a little bit of pass, as long as they kind of get close to it. I'm a little bit all right with it.
I guess the problem that really got to me with Scott Pilgrim was the way that, what's his name, Michael Cera portrayed Scott Pilgrim. He portrayed Scott Pilgrim as much more of an earnest, kind of goofy, ne'er-do-well type of person.
Yeah.
Whereas the Scott Pilgrim in this book, I'm sorry, Andrew Garfield could have done fantastic in this role.
I don't think he was a big name yet.
He definitely wasn't a big name, but at the same time, I didn't really know Michael Cera that well. I saw him in Arrested Development, and that was pretty much it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, just considering when the movie came out, maybe it was just what I was paying attention to at the time.
Sure.
Maybe he was a bigger name than I thought.
Right.
But Michael Cera was not the right choice for Scott Pilgrim.
I agree. Maybe he's not the best. I agree.
And after reading the comic, it just colored my opinion of the movie that much more simply because of Scott Pilgrim. I mean, obviously there were my reasons aside from that are legion, but it's just because I love Scott in this comic so much.
Right.
Because he's just such a stupid person, but such a lovable person at the same time. This book is phenomenal.
I love it too. It's wonderful. I don't have the full collection like you have, but I mean, it's wonderful though.
So this one was one that Brooke decided that nope, we're going out. We're getting the hardcover edition. We're getting it in color. We're getting them all the way through. And I'm like, okay, I can get them cheaper and quicker if we do that. Nope, it's happening this way. Okay, right on.
Right.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, those are all wonderful. Yeah, real cool stuff.
Yeah, some of my favorites.
Yeah, and like I said before, like I know there are far more high water marks for comic books out there for my picks. Like you could say, Watchmen. You could say all those.
Of
yes,
course.
they are great, and I'm not diminishing those. These are these ones that I, keep circling back to.
Exactly. I mean, even looking at my rack over there, you've got your Preacher, you've got your Sandman, and all amazing books, deep, powerful, poignant.
Yep.
But at the same time, even though they do speak to me, sometimes you have a personal investment and a personal story that really just gets to you with these books. Whether it be The Art of Mobius or meeting your best friend over a battle between the Savage Dragon and Spawn.
Yeah.
Experiences are experiences, and every comic touches you differently in some small way.
Yeah, it's like certain albums when you were growing up hit you a certain way, and they will always be there for you. Like there's a certain song or certain because it was at the right time at the right moment,
right,
and everything kind of fell into place for you at that moment.
Right.
So,
even what you said about Lock and Key, although good, it wouldn't have been on your top 3 list. It is for me because it brought me back into the realm of comics, and it validated horror comics for me.
That's important.
That's
important. You can't knock that.
You really can.
No.
It's all personal politics when it comes to it.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. No, I love these picks. I love everything. This is great. And I love talking comic books because I just think, like you said, I think a lot of people just put comic books as, you're just reading, Superman or Batman comic,
right.
X-Men comic. But no, I mean, there's way more out there. And just our conversation here, I don't think we talked about one mainstream comic, DC Marvel at all.
I Shadow of the Bat. But.
I mean, and I had, Captain Marvel, but he's been dead.
Yeah, but you also had a Deep Cuts book.
Yeah, he's been dead for a long time. I know they bring him back here and there, but he's been dead.
It's true.
They kept him dead, so,
All right, where can our audience find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Blackbird2004, and you can find Synthaholics at Synthaholics Duo, and then you can just go to synthaholics.com if you want to hear our podcast, if you want to get into some goofy talk about Star Trek.
Excellent.
Yeah.
If you guys want to find me, you can find anybody at Artful Gremlin Productions, from Nerdy Nomicon, Couldn't Be Models, doesn't matter. You can find us at artfulgremlin@gmail.com. No S in that one. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at Artful Gremlins. And if you guys like what we're doing here, if you want to support us, if you really love what you're hearing, feel free to go on to patreon.com/artfulgremlins. Donate $1. Donate $2.
What's $1? You can't have $1 a month. You spell
exactly.
More,
it's less than a cup of coffee.
Less than a cup of coffee. A hamburger. Come on, people.
And if you just can't do that, that's not a problem. We completely understand. But if you're listening to us on iTunes, please take the time. Give us 5 stars if you don't mind, and just write a quick review. These help us climb the charts so that more people can hear the bullshit that we talk about, hear our irreverent podcasts, our free funny for the week.
Absolutely.
So just make sure that you give us 5 stars, because we love 5 stars, and a quick review. Really helps us out. So, Aaron, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
I've been Robbie. Let's close the book on this week.